The Café Scientifique are coordinated and hosted by my office with financial support from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, Canada's largest health research funding agency. This year's series of cafes are sponsored by the Institute of Infection and Immunity, and we thank them for that sponsorship. And I would also like to thank University CIHR delegate, Dr. Peter Catini. I don't know if he's in the group. Not today, he usually attends most of these, who submits the grant application on behalf of the University of Manitoba for sponsoring these cafes. The Café Scientifique started in late 20th century as an informal discussion about scientific subjects. They were never intended to be lectures, and hope you will see that they are not intended to be lectures. The same holds true for the University of Manitoba Café Scientifique. These cafes provide insight into health-related issues of popular interest to the general public, and in turn provoke questions and provide answers. So please be engaged and ask a lot of tough questions to the panel. We have an exciting and very relevant topic for discussion tonight's cafe, one that has obviously resonated with many of you, or you wouldn't be here tonight. Helping your anxious child or teenager. I would now like to introduce your moderator for this evening, who will tell you more about the panelists and some of the ground rules that will guide our discussion this evening. Dr. Carolyn Peters is a senior manager at New Directions for Children, Youth, Adults, and Families, where she oversees 4 therapy programs, training, and evaluation. Her education is in social work, and she has a passion for supporting families to resolve their distress. Her research has focused on marginalized women's experience with social service system. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Peters.
Thank you, Dr. Jayas. Welcome. It's so nice to see so many people. I will be your moderator for this evening's discussions. So just a quick overview of how we plan to proceed. Each of the panelists will speak for 5 to 10 minutes about their perspectives on the topic for tonight. After all the panelists have spoken, I will open the floor for discussion or questions. I will be passing this wireless microphone so that everyone can hear your comments and your questions. This evening's presentation is being videotaped for later uploading on the Café Scientifique website. There's also someone taking photographs of the panelists while they speak. A link to the video will be posted on the umanitoba.ca/Café Scientifique website next week. We are also live tweeting this cafe. The hashtag is #Café Scientifique if you'd like to follow the conversation or tweet. During the question period, I will take the last question around 8:25, and then we'll wrap things up. There are refreshments at the table at the back, and materials and a sign-up sheet for notifications of future research events like this. You will notice that there are evaluation forms on your chairs, and we ask that you fill those out and leave them on the materials table at the end of the evening. Please note that this is a discussion forum, and we ask that advice on specific problems or treatment is not what the presenters are here to provide. So please restrict your questions to be more general in nature. That brings me to tonight's expert panel. On my right are Dr. Roberta Woodgate, Dr. Leanne and Dr. John Walker. Our first speaker this evening is Dr. Roberta Woodgate. Roberta is a professor in the Faculty of Nursing, University of Manitoba. She holds a Canadian Institute of Health Research Applied Chair in Reproductive, Child and Youth Health Services and Policy Research. She has developed a strong foundation of research on children's and youth's perspectives and experiences of health and illness that has contributed to advancing the improvement of health service delivery for Canada's children and youth. In all her research, Dr. Woodgate strives to ensure that the voices of children and youth are accurately represented by adopting innovative research approaches. Roberta.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here tonight. This is the first for me, so.
Volume, sector and audio.
Can you hear me now? Thank you. I'm very happy to be here tonight. This is my first time doing something like this, so I may be a little bit anxious. So, but bear with me. First off, how many people, if you mind sharing, have a child with an anxiety disorder? Okay. Well, what I'm going to set the stage tonight is to tell you or to talk about what it's like to be a child or a teenager with anxiety disorder. And then what I'm going to be talking about comes from a research study that Dr. Walker and I are currently undertaking. It's looking at how children and youth experience anxiety from their own voices. There hasn't been a lot of research where you ask the child to tell us what it's like. So this study is meant to, we're hoping from the study, what children and youth have to tell us will help to improve the health services for them. What we're doing with the study is we first go out and we interview the children, and then we get the youth, and then we give them cameras, and we say, go out into your world over a time period of a couple of weeks, and take pictures of what it's like to live with anxiety on a daily basis. And you'll see some of the photos that I brought today. I'm going to talk to you about them. The first one in the middle, this is a picture, the teenager who took this picture, that's one of her drawings, and she took a picture of her of this drawing. So, and this is the quote that that describes this photo. It's a picture of my painting that I call overthinking, because that's what it says. Because overthinking is a big part of anxiety, because you overthink something, and you think about it so much, and you think about all the possible things that could go wrong. It builds up, and then you just explode. And so that's kind of what it's like. You know, I saw a different version of something like that, but it wasn't colors exploding. It was, I think it was a galaxy, or something, or an explosion. It might have been a mushroom cloud, but yeah, anxiety is something definitely like overthinking. They kind of go together, so you kind of feel like your brain is exploding. A lot of the youth in our studies so far have talked about this overthinking, and you know, just by listening to the story and the narratives, it really it's much more powerful than, you know, when you give them a questionnaire and they check off different symptoms and so on. But the study is really showing how these kids are struggling, living with anxiety on a daily basis, and you know, the pain that they feel. Okay, now that picture on the far right around there of the grass, another youth has said, now there's dead grass and there's also living grass. So for this youth, this is what anxiety means to her. This is dead grass and not dead grass. I think it kind of shows how with anxiety you kind of feel. Especially like a million times it disables you to do some things. So you kind of feel like you're not living the way you could, and the way that everyone around you is. So it's kind of showing like the dead grass are people with anxiety, and all the green living grass are all other people without anxiety. You feel jealous because you wish that life was like easier for you, and how easy it is for everyone else, and easier or whatever. I don't like saying that because that's me assuming that a certain person is having an easy life. But I know at least everyone has like one part of their life that's easier than mine. I feel kind of envious. When I was taking this picture, a friend was with me, and I had to explain to my friend and what it was for. But I felt awkward doing that because my friend's one of those people who have it easier, in a sense. So again, just talking about the youth in our study, we're talking about how powerless they would feel, how being alone, and really important about how not being connected, and how others not knowing them, and not knowing who they really are. And then this picture over here, although, again, their stories are very powerful, and there's pain in their stories, there's also some positives, because the kids did talk about the different ways of coping. So they do try to live with anxiety. So this is a journal, and then that was one of the coping strategies that a lot of the kids are using in our study. So this team is saying, journaling really helps me to spread out my feelings. I want to take all my writings from when I was a kid, and I want to make something into it to help other people. Other kids could read it, and then for them to start out by saying, you're not alone. Because I think a lot of people like me sometimes think I'm having some problem that nobody else has, but actually a lot of people have it. Again, the kids in our study also talk about being afraid to share their feelings because of the stigma, because how others will look at them, how they may be seen to be something that they are not. So, again, I'm just setting the stage. And
thank you, Roberta. Our next speaker is Dr. Leanne Mack. Leanne is a clinical psychologist at the Manitoba Adolescent Treatment Center and an assistant professor in the Department of Clinical Health Psychology at the University of Manitoba. She works with various children and adolescents with anxiety and co-oak problems. Her research interests include treatment of child anxiety and parental decision-making. Leanne?
Thank you. I just want to first say that I really appreciate being invited to speak tonight and sitting amongst the panelists around me. So just maybe as a first thing, I'm going to shift gears a bit. So Roberta's talked about really the experience of youth and sort of how they feel anxious, and I'm going to really focus on parents' perspectives and some of their opinions. So just to survey the audience a little bit, just kind of raise your hand if you're a parent. Raise your hand if you've had experience dealing with child anxiety. Okay. And raise your hand if you've ever faced a health problem which required you to make a treatment decision. And so keeping your hands up, how many of you were given treatment options to choose from? Great, thank you. In my experience as a clinician, often parents are coming to me and they're really puzzled about what to do and unsure about how to help their child with anxiety. For the most part, they've tried lots of medication approaches, some success or some with limited success. And so when they come to see me, they're often seeking other types of help. For parents, I think part of knowing how to help their child is first recognizing that anxiety is a problem, and then knowing the types of treatments that are available, and then of course trying to seek help. But in talking to parents, what I've found is that they often encounter problems in seeking help. So some things such as lack of accessibility to services, to long wait lists, not knowing that their child's anxiety is a problem, not knowing the types of treatments that are available, and oftentimes there's difficulties with the school in terms of dealing with the child's anxiety at school. So those are some of the things, and often they're really desperate for help. From my clinical work and research that I've done in listening to parents, I've learned that parents often want to be heard when faced with a decision, and often want to be engaged in that process. They prefer to take on an active collaborative role in decision making, and would like to really have a final say after getting input from the professional. So I just want to also read a quote from a parent that really sums up their treatment decision making process. I want to just probably have time to process it, little time to discuss with my husband and friends or family or whatever, and have time to ask questions. I wouldn't want a medical professional to think, you know, you probably won't understand this, so I just won't talk to you about it. I would just want to know, and maybe if I did understand, can you explain that in a different way that I could understand? but I wouldn't want them assuming, well, I'm a medical professional and you're just a parent. Or, you wouldn't understand because you're not a medical professional. You know, I want some dialogue there. So that really captures the essence of parents really wanting to be engaged. And some of the other research I've been involved in, I've looked at parents, the types of information parents would like when considering treatment. And from that, I found that parents really prefer a wide range of information about treatment. So knowing, the treatment content or what's involved, the treatment goals, how effective it is, and also wanting information about the provider. So interpersonal aspects, expertise, that sort of thing. Really from the research that I've been involved in, really 4 major themes really came out for me. The first being that parents really see themselves as protectors for their children, so needing to make a decision that's in the best interest of the child. Roberta talked about sort of stigma, and so parents really wanting to also ward off any stigma associated with anxiety, also wanting to protect their child's privacy if they were to seek treatment. So that's sort of one of the main themes. Second, as I've already talked about, there's this real desire to be strongly involved in decision making and in deciding treatment for their child. Third is that parents have really talked about wanting information and the importance of information as being key in decision making. So really wanting a variety of information, a lot of information, or a summary of really quality, relevant information. In terms of where they want that information, parents have told me that they would prefer seeking it from discussions with the healthcare provider, through written pamphlets, or through credible internet sources. The last theme that really came out was that parents really don't perceive all treatments as being equal. So they often don't view medication favorably, but they would consider it if the benefits outweighed the costs. And generally they saw counseling or psychosocial type treatment approaches to be much more beneficial. So just to kind of sum up, what is some of the research telling us and how does it impact clinical practice? I'm looking at the research findings, and it's really saying that parents really strongly desire participation in decision making, but really they're not aware that there's a process to be made. So really that's suggesting that we being providers need to communicate that there are options that exist and that there's a need to choose among the options, so making that really known to parents. There's also a range of views when it comes to medication versus psychosocial treatments. So some parents really value medication and others really reluctant to even pursue that avenue. So again, it's really highlighting the importance of listening to parents, their concerns, their preferences, while also providing accurate information so that they can better evaluate the benefits and costs of certain treatments. And then lastly, parents have really described what they want in terms of a treatment process. So a process that entails invitation to participate, an opportunity to discuss with the healthcare provider, a chance to collect and evaluate information. And so that really suggests a need for healthcare providers to really have good relational skills to establish a good working relationship with parents and families, and to be able to address their needs and listen and respect some of their beliefs and values. That's certainly something I do try to work on as a clinician in trying to listen to parents. But even though the task of communication seems to be rather straightforward, we know that oftentimes there's variability in how providers communicate and work with families. So, thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. Our last speaker is Dr. John Walker. John is a professor in the Department of Clinical Health Psychology at the University of Manitoba. He has worked for many years in helping children, parents, and adults overcoming anxiety problems. He is especially interested in self-help approaches to treatment. John is the parent of 2 children and now enjoying spending time with his first grandchild. John?
Thanks very much, Carolyn. It's great to see such a good turnout tonight, and we can see how interested people are in this topic of children's anxiety. I started my life as a school psychologist and really enjoyed working in the schools every day, and as the years went on I became more aware of just how common problems with anxiety are in the school. So if you as a parent go into any school in Winnipeg and Manitoba, about 1 in 10 children at every single grade level is having significant difficulty with anxiety. So that's 1 in 10. So just think of the numbers involved there. So if your child has difficulty with anxiety, there's a good chance 1 or 2 other children in the same class are struggling. Often the patterns of anxiety differ, but it's a very, very common issue. So there's a great deal of excitement in our field because of the potential now for preventing these problems. It turns out if you help young people with anxiety, and the earlier the better, it reduces the risk later in life of them having other kinds of problems. Problems like anxiety as an adult or a teenager, depression problems, and even substance use problems. So there's tremendous promise there. At the same time, it's kind of overwhelming if you think of it. In Winnipeg, there's probably 6 full-time people working with anxiety problems, and many thousands of children in the province with those problems. So the resources we have are sort of a drop in the bucket. And that's where the idea of self-help comes in. There's been researchers both in Australia and also some of our work, and what we found is that if you start to work with parents of young children, the parents can pick up a lot of the techniques very quickly and apply them in everyday life and really help give their child a boost. Myself and my colleagues at St-Boniface were really interested in this because all of us had the experience of having kids with significant anxiety issues, and we were doing this every day at home. So we started to work a lot with parents, and we often work in groups, but even working with group work, you just can't get to enough people. It turns out that there's a resource list at the back you can look at later, but there's some very good self-help books for parents that we like and we refer people to, but often the books have trouble tailoring the advice to the specific family. So you're trying to write a book that will apply to a 4-year-old and a 12-year-old. There's quite a spread there. The big advantage of looking at the web that we're working on is you can develop the child and the problems the child is facing and the challenges the parents are facing. I'm going to ask for a show of hands also. Who has access to internet from home here? Would you raise your hand? Okay, so just about everybody. Could you raise your hand if you've ever taken an internet course? Maybe just a short one, 2 hours, 4 hours. Raise your hand really high. Okay. So most people more and more people have taken a course on the internet. And one of the beauties of the internet compared to books are great. You can see this place is full of fantastic books. One of the advantages of the internet, though, is it makes it way more accessible, and you can keep updating the material very easily. So if you look at that poster in the middle there, you may not be able to see it in the back, but it just gives you an idea about what a web page might look like in our sort of beta program right now. And if you look down the left-hand side, it deals with some of the specific topics that are covered in this program. So it starts out with basic topics like understanding anxiety, risk factors for anxiety, and how you overcome anxiety. And then it gets down into the nitty-gritty of specific situations you can work on, like using rewards to help your child face their fears, setting up a situation where your child can face their fears, and dealing with some important issues now like screen time. So one of the things that happens with, people are always asking me when I'm talking to media people, is anxiety increasing in the population? I'm not convinced that it is, actually. I'm not sure at all that it's increasing. I think it might be about the same. We know way more about it, and we can do more to help, but I'm not sure it's increasing. But what is changing, I see some people with gray hair here like myself, I was a baby boomer, and when I was a kid, on Saturday morning, what your parents did is kicked you out the front door, and they told you not to come home till lunchtime. And then after lunch, they kicked you out again and told you not to come home till supper time. Does anyone remember that experience? No? You were out on the street all day long, and during the baby boom, if you went out on the street, there were 5 or 6 kids around your age, whatever age you were looking for. There were lots of them, you know, and you'd range all over the neighborhood, wreaking havoc with the neighbors' gardens and that sort of thing. So the world is changing, and the challenge of things like screen time for parents is that screen time is competing with children's time for reading books, for playing with friends, for going outdoors, for exploring, for being physical. So in our program, we have this thing about educating parents about screen time and encouraging them to really be in charge of that. How much screen time do you allow for your children, and that kind of thing. So unfortunately, we're not quite set to go now. We're right now at the evaluation stage of this program. And each of those units on that left-hand side, we've set it up as a survey. So we're going to be involving parents in looking at each of these units, reacting to it, answering the questions, telling us what they think about it. We'll use that to improve it. And then once it's set to go, we'll have people work through the website and see how they do. We've already had a lot of feedback from parents about how they like to use web materials, and we've also had the feedback they really like paper too. So we've got these units on the web, and they say, let me print out one so I can get it in my hands and I can show my grandmother or that kind of thing who's providing care for the child. So this is one area of tremendous promise. Self-help in general, I think, has tremendous promise. What we find when we meet with parents who are having a child who's struggling with anxiety, parents are very highly motivated to help their child. Parents are already doing very many very helpful things, and often they're just running into areas they don't know which way to go. And if you give them a little nudge about doing a bit more of this and a bit less of that, it really opens the door for things they can do to help their child. So we think this sort of whole approach of working on self-help, developing modules that address the concern of parents. So for example, we've realized through working with parents, we don't have anything about calming kids down when they're having a meltdown. Has anyone here had a child that's had a meltdown ever? We used to have lots of those around our house. How to deal with a child with a meltdown and what you can do as a parent to handle that effectively. We'll probably have some extra advice about helping kids who are especially shy. Another thing that's changed in society besides screen time is friendships. Again, in my era when you were playing in your neighborhood, almost everyone went to the same school. There were a zillion kids on your street and so on. Now, each generation that goes on, the kids on any street go to 4 or 6 different schools. There's just fewer kids on every street. You know, the rate of children in the population's gone down. So there's some real challenges that parents face. Another way we're thinking of using this material actually is by collaborating with schools who are very interested in sort of promoting health in kids and good emotional health, in getting this information out, for example, about screen time to parents right when they start nursery and kindergarten, to give parents a good idea about how they can manage screen time. That's a relevant thing for kids with anxiety, but it's relevant to all kids. So we want to work with them on sort of disseminating this information. The experience in most areas of healthcare is it's much easier to intervene with a problem earlier. It's much easier to prevent a problem than to deal with it when it's become really entrenched. So that's the approach we're taking. So when we sort of go live with this website, we'll be especially targeting kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, nursery even, and we think that'll be a great time for parents. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thanks, John. Isn't that a lovely overview of the issues? So I'd now like to open the floor for questions and comments. And just a reminder that there are refreshments at the back, and you can get up and help yourself anytime. I'll be playing a bit of a Phil Donahue role where I'm roaming around with the microphone. And I wasn't sure if that was a good metaphor for this audience, but I'm thinking you know, who fooled on he was. I'll be looking for hands, and I see one already. So wait till I get there with the microphone, because we all want to hear your comments and your questions. And I will keep an eye open for hands. Who's first?
Hi. Hello, my name is Ned Corll. I'm a retread prof, U of M, but I didn't retire because I never got tired in the first place. So that's my intro. Wouldn't the first approach with people with anxiety is to ask them why they're anxious, the reason they're anxious, and the source of the anxiety, because only that person knows. And I think if we work from there, and I sense some of the Dr. Walker's comments, because if we expect outside help too much, then you cause confusion, and you put stigmas and labels and so forth. So please, any reaction to my comment?
But it's a great question. So I think the theme there was that you want to support people's ability to manage problems themselves. And one of the early parts of the program there that we talked about, in the early part of most of the work we do, is to really cue parents into the importance of listening a lot, asking a few questions, watching for patterns of behavior, and so on. Because some children don't verbalize what it is that they're anxious about. And actually some kids don't know. You know, some kids are just kind of wired to be anxious. They're temperamentally wired to be that way. So you can have anxiety before you have language, for example. You know, that kind of thing. But your point, I think, is very well taken. The importance of supporting parents in being really good listeners with their kids. Supporting parents in, there's a section on problem solving. So instead of me solving the problem for my child, how do I help them learn to solve their problem? How do I help pull solutions from them in dealing with a challenging situation?
I'm just looking at the board here, and what is considered risk factors?
Okay, great question. So what are the risk factors for anxiety? It turns out for children's anxiety, there's a big genetic factor. Most people aren't too surprised in that about things running in families. And so there's quite a big genetic component. Sometimes people hear that and they think, well, if it's genetic, there's nothing we can do about it. And that's not true. So even though there's a strong genetic component, people who have a genetic loading for anxiety can learn ways of managing it, feeling safe, feeling comfortable. And it's interesting, research with rhesus monkeys shows that if you breed rhesus monkeys to be anxious, but you give them a very favorable environment when they're growing up, a very responsive environment, they turn out to be sensitive adult monkeys in a positive sense. So I talk to people, anxiety isn't just a curse. Anxiety, first of all, it's necessary for life, but people who are prone to anxiety often are prone to being sensitive to others and tuned into others, and that's a kind of a gift. So it's not a one-way street.
What's the research around the correlation between screen time and anxiety? I mean, it seems like we've got this normative framework that we're all operating in, and screen time is bad. I just would like somebody to tell me why it's bad.
Okay. So, again, another really good question. You know, are we just speculating about screen time being related to anxiety? And actually, in terms of the connection between screen time and health, there's a very strong connection. Okay. So screen time is related to weight problems. More screen time, more weight problems. Screen time is related to physical activity. More screen time, less physical activity. Screen time is related to poor performance in school. More screen time, less success in reading, and so on. So it's all those. In the anxiety area, I would say we don't have large-scale research to answer that question. In terms of the clinical research we do, that some of the kids with the most severe anxiety that we see have the biggest amount of screen time. So kids who aren't going to school because they're very anxious, when they're at home, guess where they are? You know, they're in front of the computer and the television and so on, and sometimes getting those kids back to school involves the parents really taking charge of screen time. So, good point.
Is the mental health crisis clinic on Bannatyne available to parents at off hours, nights, especially for teenagers when you're really stuck?
My understanding of that particular center, and John, just jump in if I'm wrong, but I believe it is a 24-hour crisis center. In talking to some of the people I know there, they're still trying to iron out how to triage folks that arrive and emerge at the hospital there, and then how to get them over to the crisis center. But to answer your question, I'm sure if a parent were to present to that particular facility, there's probably ways where you can get some help and get direction anyways as to what to do.
There's also a mobile crisis team that goes out to homes, and I think if I were a parent struggling with a crisis, that might be where I'd go first, to give them a call, because they'll come right to your house, speak to the child, size up the situation, and then they can direct you as to what service is most likely to be helpful.
When we used to have phone books, that phone number was on the front page of the phone book, but now you can access it on the internet.
Hi, just as a healthcare practitioner myself, I'm just wondering how you guys define child, and if a toddler can be then classified as having anxiety, and if so, if those mobile crisis unit interventions are available for parents that are just overwhelmed and frustrated and after hours and in need of support.
What if Carolyn's the best bet on that one? Carolyn, do you have any thoughts? I mean, with New Directions?
Yes, I work at New Directions, and we work with children under the age of 18. So we have two programs, one that works with the under 12 age group and one that works with the teen population. The mobile crisis unit will come out and consult with you on any concern that you have with your children. So if your question is, would they help diagnose anxiety in a young child? No, they would come out and find out what is the crisis, what's the distress, what's the concern, and offer some consultation sort of in the moment. Usually when people call the mobile crisis unit, they're overwhelmed and in a crisis. If parents are concerned about a toddler who's anxious, very often they will connect with their employee assistance center counselor, or come to one of our programs or a community program that offers counseling. So, does that answer your question? Is there a part two? Okay.
I just wanted to add, there is a P parenting line for the young children that parents can access 24 hours.
There was another hand.
I was just wondering about children who grow into teens and very obviously have an anxiety problem, but it makes it very difficult to bring them into treatment of any sort because they are reticent and afraid of it, and that it just seems to block any kind of progress. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to that, of how to get beyond that, which...
Okay. Boy, I think that may be relevant to lots of parents. In a way, the reason we emphasize getting involved early is that a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old really wants to please their parents and that kind of thing. A 13 or 14 or 15-year-old is just as likely to say, get out of my face, mind your own business, I'll take care of it, that sort of thing. So we frequently see that kind of situation. I think the key there, though, is that people have a good understanding about what drives these situations. So I'd advise any parent in that situation to try to arrange to see someone as parents, as parents in a family context. And even if your child won't come, many of the people that do family work and parent work will have great advice for how to handle that. And as a parent, you can kind of lean the environment more towards your child learning ways to cope and managing the problem. And just having another set of ears and eyes to deal with the problem usually helps people a lot. It helps them see solutions they weren't seeing and that kind of thing. I think Carolyn, again, and some of the new directions in family service options really have good resources there.
Thanks. Yeah, we have some brochures at the back, but we also have a website for New Directions, and if you type in newdirections.nb.ca, you'll get the website and all the different programs. You can click on the different programs and see what's available.
Oh, one question I had was, you said there was 2 programs, one for under 12 and one for teenagers. What are the programs' names? I'm familiar with some of the New Directions programs.
Good. The family counseling program for the kids under 12 is called the Parenting Center, and it's at 321 McDermott. And we also offer Triple P parenting classes and support groups for parents and therapy consultations. And the other program is at 491 Portage, and it's called the Family Therapy Program. And it's for families where the kids are over 12, so 13, 14 teenagers. And we also do a teen group, and we're just taking referrals right now for the teen group. So it's kids who have who are teenagers and who might have intense emotions that they're trying to sort of figure out how to manage. And you can just call the number 204-786-7051. That's our switchboard, and get more information.
Hey, I'm just wondering what resources or advice you would give to parents who don't necessarily have a child with a diagnosis, but can't tell the difference between normal toddler tantrums and whether or not they have an sensitive or an anxious child. I'm sort of in that camp right now, and I'm just interested in what might be out there for us to look at and what we should be watching for.
Again, really good point. There's a resource list in the back of books that are useful to parents. So if you looked at one of those books, get it from the library, the bookstore, that'll give you some really good ideas. Anxiety isn't sort of a black and white thing, so it's not that you either have it or don't have it. We all have it. It's useful, it's helpful to us, and so on. We start to talk about an anxiety problem or an anxiety disorder when it starts to interfere with life. Kind of another truism is you need a driver's license to drive a car, but you don't need to take lessons to be a parent. So, probably a lot of us get advice from our parents. I get advice from my parents, but that's another way that the world is changing. It used to be many years ago, your parents were 40 years old and you're asking them for advice, and now they're 60 or 65, and being a parent is a long way away. So there are just amazing resources out there for parents, and Triple P is one, that it's a program designed for every parent. It's not for parents who necessarily have a big problem, it's for every parent. And there's some kind of core parenting skills that just work for every kid. So almost all of and that's a key message actually, almost all of the skills that we teach that work with anxiety work just as well with kids without anxiety. And so they're sort of fundamentals of really good strategies. They're kind of effective people skills. And again, most parents come in with lots of skills, but they can always learn some more. They always benefit from having a different perspective. So the other big thing is if you consult with someone, no one's automatically into labeling everybody. So a lot of people would be happy to give advice over the phone or that sort of thing if you have that concern.
I see an aisle here, that's good. Gives me a spot.
Thank you. I think a few questions have talked about the link between anxiety and behavior, so I want to be specific about asking the panel to talk about behavior. As a parent and as a school practitioner, this is certainly a delicate balance that we juggle all the time, and we may be putting in things that help the child or the student. In other words, you don't have to attend 2 out of 5 classes. You can come to our safe room and we'll make it very calm and much lower number of students. But then we're not, this is a slippery slope to assume we're not going to the other 3 that we were successful in prior to this intervention. So it's a balance that we juggle at school, and certainly that I've juggled as a parent. When do we know that something's anxiety, and when do we know that it's behavior, and how do we know the difference, or is there? And if the panel could maybe address that for us, please.
Maybe I'll just make a few comments before John jumps in. So I think you're right, that, I mean, an excellent question. How do you know when sort of what's what, right? I think the step in gradual sort of, you know, maybe dividing it up and breaking it down to see that it's manageable is a great strategy. I think building in rewards, behavioral, like a motivation resistance kind of thing, or is it true anxiety? So I think if building in some rewards of trying to accomplish the next step might be a way to kind of better understand and assess what's really going on. But certainly you do want to kind of keep on that track of, okay, you've done now really well with 3, let's kind of keep moving on to the next step. So that would be kind of what I would suggest.
Yeah, so some of the research that we've done with parents of really young kids, like kindergarten and grade 1 age, indicate that a real struggle that parents have is, how hard should I push? You know, should I push? Should I not push? What's the right thing to do, and so on. And as Leanne was mentioning, one of the things that really helps here is to use rewards that are appropriate. The biggest reward for most kids actually is time with their parents. A special activity, going and doing something fun. It's not candy or chocolate or that kind of thing. So we work with parents a lot on activity rewards. If a child or anxious, or a child or adult is anxious, if you push hard on them to do what you think they should do, all of their energy will go into resisting. So they'll, and that's what happens with these 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. They resist a lot. If you find the right reward system that gets everybody on the same page of going in the same direction, you know, the child wants the reward and you want them to get the reward, and you can negotiate about what they're going to do. So many parents, the ones that come to our groups at the hospital, sometimes they'll have a child with anxiety and autism and ADHD. You know, they have 3 problems. And sometimes parents struggle to sort out, you know, what percentage is each. And we say, that's not so important. What's important is to find, you know, solutions. A lot of the solutions work well for children with many different issues and many different problems. Good teaching, you know, and good learning strategies apply across problems. So I think it's good to be aware of that. The other issue actually is among the kids who have really a primary anxiety problem. One of the things that really helps is for the parents to use really good discipline techniques. So setting limits and teaching children to be cooperative and follow instructions and so on. So that's often something that's really important to the parents in getting through this.
I may be permitted to do a follow-up. In stress management, the first approach is for the person to identify the source of the stress, and then you work on ownership, and then you develop skills on that. This is just an expansion of the first question. The other one is you talk about screening. I think Cialis has it solved now, because the parents throw out their teenagers for at least 4 or 5 hours, so they can develop friendships and problem solving and do their thing.
Great humor. Great humor. Actually, you know, that I think another thing that really resonates about what you said too is just the importance of managing stress. So life has stresses, and So in our work with children, the idea is not to take all the stress out of their life so that there's no problems. You want to challenge them at the place they're ready for now and move ahead, and you want to increase their strength and so on. So a big part of overcoming anxiety actually for kids and for adults is to learn to accept anxiety, face it, go on in any case, persevere, those kind of things. And often with really young children, parents be sort of frightened by their child's anxiety or the anxiety response. And so part of what we do is also the parents accepting that the child sometimes is really uncomfortable and anxious, and finding the right level of accepting a certain amount of that and helping them stay at a right level where they're not overwhelmed, but you don't remove all the challenges either.
And John, in our study, the teens really talk about that, about having to get through it, to really deal with it. And these are kids who haven't been as yet seen for treatment, so they really talk about owning it and almost like too much self-responsibility that it's there. So.
Hi, you mentioned triple P, and I have no idea what it is.
Triple P is a program that was first developed in Australia by psychologists, and it's really, Triple P stands for Positive Parenting Program. I think there's a website that it's triplep.org.
If you Google Triple P Manitoba, you'll get lots and lots of resources. So they threw, pardon me? Yeah, TRIPLEP, Triple P, and you bring lots of resources, and also Carolyn can tell us about more.
So a number of the organizations that offer counseling services in Winnipeg have had their counselors trained in the Triple P parenting program. So we, for example, at the Parenting Center, which I mentioned before on McDermott, offer an 8-week parenting course, and there's childcare provided, and people come and talk with other parents about different issues each week. And so it's a psychoeducational group, and many of the, does MATC offer?
MATC does not at this point.
So many of the other counseling services in Winnipeg offer the Triple P parenting. So yeah, if you Google Triple P Manitoba, you'll get sort of a list of the organizations that offer the parenting courses.
Hi, I was just wondering if you have any research on children in care and anxiety, and if you're familiar, research what suggestions, because we have children in care who move from home to home and go. I work with child and family services, and we have children at the age of 12 and they've moved 14, 15 and more times. So how do we, as service providers, foster parents, and even families or educators, how do we help those children deal with anxiety?
That's a really challenging question. So to repeat that, children in care, children who've had really unstable family situations. Someone asked about risk factors. So one of the risk factors for developing an anxiety problem is lots of life disruption, and even parents who are struggling with life, parents who face a lot of stresses, frequent moves, those kind of things. So those all are risk factors. I think the good news about anxiety, problems in anxiety, is people are amazingly resilient. So if you can create a stable living situation for someone with, people that care about them and show an interest, we don't see people that can't move or can't learn or that kind of thing. A lot of the techniques of overcoming anxiety are very, very pragmatic, based on learning. So it's not very mysterious. We like to work with classroom teachers, we work a lot with parents, and what we try to do is help the people surrounding the child to have this, especially with the young kids, to have the skills to encourage them in the right direction, to support them, and to help them build up that confidence in life that everybody needs.
Just one more thing I wanted to add. one of the things that we noticed is that when parents who had their children in foster care came to the Triple P parenting groups, sometimes they were frustrated because one of the things that you need to do as part of the parenting group is to practice things at home with your children. And if the children were in foster care, the parents were frustrated and they sort of had different issues that they were dealing with. So we designed a separate group apart from the Triple P. So we use the Triple P principles in another group that's called How to Have a Good Visit. And so we offer a parenting group for parents and grandparents who have their children in foster care. And that way they can sort of think about the issues and learn the principles of the Triple P parenting, but apply it directly to their situation.
And maybe I'll just add something else to what you said, Carolyn, too, is it's in my experience in working with some of the kids in care is that there's certainly anxiety just because of their situation and very unstable, but sometimes part of that anxiety is really more of an attachment-based issue. So having said that, it's not to say any of the strategies that John mentioned won't work, but there's certainly an underlying attachment, so the need to have really that stable connection with an adult, as you're probably aware. So that's really something that needs to be really looked at in addition to the anxiety. I find in working with kids in care that there's always that piece, and once you have that stable home environment and that real connection with an adult, I find that that anxiety can be brought down much more, and you can actually start working on some of the, maybe some of the Triple P techniques. So that's just something I wanted to add to that.
Hi, I was just wondering, is depression a type of an anxiety, or is it a symptom, or how are they related?
Okay, depression is a different problem, and actually in young kids, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, depression is kind of a rare thing. Anxiety is common, but depression is rare. But if you struggle a lot with anxiety over the years, your risk of developing depression sort of goes up. So often depression can grow out of having anxiety, especially an unresolved anxiety problem. So in a way, one of the things people are hoping and looking at in research is, can resolving anxiety problems early reduce your risk of having depression as a teenager, later in life, that kind of thing. Depression really, the rate of depression, the number of kids having depression really picks up around age 15, and it's often when kids are really getting interested in their social activities, romantic relationships, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of rocky roads in there, and that's a time in life where depression is way more of a risk.
I did see another hand, but I can't remember where it was. Is it over here?
I wonder how much anxiety can be caused in letting children grow up. I certainly didn't know what to do as far as letting children grow up.
One of the units that isn't in our program yet that we want to add to it before it sort of hits the road is, it's implicit in your question, that's encouraging independence. And I think that's something that's changed a bit over time too. When when I was growing up, I had 3 sisters and a brother and whatever, and I would go to my grandparents on the bus when I was 6 years old, down the road. So the level of independence that was expected and tolerated and permitted back then is way more. We find that we have to work with some parents on deciding what the right thing is, but really encouraging independence. So encouraging kids at a certain age to walk to school, take the bus to school, take the city bus. And when parents are reluctant about that, I've had some parents, or some kids say, I've never ridden the city bus, I'm 16 or 17. And I say to the parents, well, when do you want them to learn to, ride the bus? Do you want them to be in Dublin, or, is that a better place than Winnipeg, or a place you don't speak the language? So really getting the right pace of encouraging independence and so on is a big, big theme in terms of helping people to get around anxiety. And kids, when you teach them to do these things, including cooking and washing your clothes and doing those things, their self-confidence really goes up. They feel really great. So So as a parent, being aware of that theme of really encouraging independence that's right for your child's age and developmental level is a really important task.
Hi. Wondering if you have any suggestions for relieving physical symptoms of anxiety, like pretty severe tummy troubles, and telling a child to calm down and think happy thoughts doesn't always work.
Maybe I'll start that one because, okay, so the question was about physical symptoms of anxiety and tummy trouble and so on. And often when adults come in for help with anxiety or children come in for help with anxiety, everybody's focused first on let's get rid of the physical symptoms. And that's often where we go last. We go first to facing your fears and not interrupting your life because of the symptoms. So we work a lot on acceptance of symptoms, not trying to get rid of them, but accepting them and getting on anyway. The one or two simple techniques we might teach with, if parents are really focused on that, is just something like relaxed breathing, to slow your breathing down and that kind of thing. But we do it very quickly, and we have the child and parent practice it, but we really, they get focused on the main show. There's some really interesting research that with something called recurrent abdominal pain, kids who have a lot of stomach pain related to school and so on. And one researcher followed them up 20 years later. And the ones who did well as adults had parents who insisted they go to school every day, or almost every day. The ones who did very poorly were the ones who stayed home from school a lot. And with adults who come in with something called irritable bowel syndrome, if you work on that problem, that's got a lot of stomach issues, diarrhea, constipation, and so on. If you work with those people to get their life back to normal, stop avoiding things, and not reshaping your life because of how your stomach is doing, again, they do better. So often the way you solve the problem is kind of an indirect way. It's a bit surprising. So we spend a lot of time just with kids working on that sort of independence and confidence and facing challenges. And if we amp that up, often the physical symptoms just settle out on their own.
So you just answered a question about physical symptoms and how you address those. Could you give us some guidelines as to how to deal with the mental aspect of when your child is actually having an anxiety attack and you know the signs, you know the symptoms? Is there a go-to guide that we can say, okay, what are you thinking about now? That's an unrealistic thought or that's a realistic thought. Like, what kind of thought process can we follow to perhaps help?
I'm sure
He's the expert.
We've just been writing all these units, so we're thinking a lot about this. We encourage parents when the children are really emotionally aroused, like really worked up, having a meltdown, to actually not do a lot of problem solving, not try to work out with them what to do at that moment. We work a lot on listening and paying attention. The one thing we might say to do is slow your breathing down, that kind of thing. But it's quite amazing actually when a kid or an adult comes in with a really severe panic attack, if you just get them talking, after they talk for 5 minutes, chances are it's going to be gone. And so just talking about what's going on for them and that kind of thing, that really often helps a lot. What we work with parents is not pushing kids too much to solve a problem or to feel differently when they're feeling anxious. When an adult has really severe anxiety like that, let's say their heart's going fast or they're feeling really dizzy from anxiety and so on, we might work with them to try to make it worse. So I might say, can you make your heart go even faster now? Or can you make yourself, so we try to get them to take their anxiety up, and when they stop fighting to get it down, it settles down by itself. So for a child who's really worked up that way, number one thing, if they wanted to talk, is just talk and listen, and maybe I might say about slowing the breathing down, but then I just sit beside them and give them time, and nature wants to take it down. So a lot of anxiety is about an adrenaline response. When you have an adrenaline response, you can only stay there so long, and nature wants to take it down. If you're not fighting to make it go away, it'll go away really sooner. If you're struggling to get rid of it and to try to feel different, it'll get worse. So for adults, for example, when they're having a really bad bout of anxiety, if you try to get them to relax during that, often their anxiety will get worse. If you don't try to get them to relax, if you ask them to make it higher, often it'll settle down faster. It's a bit paradoxical.
And I'll just add that, once that anxiety does subside, you refer to sort of the mental or some like maybe cognitive techniques. Maybe that's a time where you can then explore a little bit around what were the triggers, and then do some of that sort of detective work around, okay, is that something that really happens? Is that the worst thing that could happen? That kind of thing. But I think certainly addressing the physiological stuff first, and then that gives you an opportunity to really then look at some of the other things that you can then really talk about. So.
I work, I'm a psychologist that works with adults, and I do work with anxiety disorders. And you mentioned something about acceptance, and I'm less familiar with working with kids. So I was wondering if there's any kind of new acceptance and commitment therapy protocols for children and adolescents. Because I work with
okay.
families as well, and their kids have anxiety, so it would be nice to be able to tell them just something in addition to refer them on.
Yeah. So for those in the audience, I want to just explain a little bit about acceptance and commitment and so on. So the idea of acceptance actually is when you're feeling a certain way, you don't have to struggle to feel differently. It's better to accept how you feel right now. Parents are quite shocked actually that kids at 5 and 6 and 7 years old start to worry about their parents dying. Or themselves dying. You say, what's a 6 or 7-year-old thinking about this? Turns out it's normal to be thinking about death at that age and to start to tune into that. A lot of parents are surprised by that. But learning to accept even upsetting and frightening things. So when a parent hears the child say, well, what if you die? And they're very frightened by that. The natural response a lot of parents have, probably most parents, is to reassure them, well, I'm not going to die. I'm only 33 years old or that kind of thing. The fly in the ointment there is if you go to any school in Winnipeg and there's 200 or 300 kids there, give it a year or two and the parent will die, probably. A grandparent will die for sure, and if you wait long enough, a child will die. So trying to reassure them it's not going to happen doesn't work to us. So accepting the thoughts and the worries. And often kids are very pragmatic, so if you start to talk to them, well, if mom died or if mom and dad died, first of all, it'll be really upsetting, let them be upset, let them cry, but often they want things like, well, who do I live with then? And can I take my dog with me, or can I take my toys with me, or that kind of thing. And often parents are caught up sort of in denial. I tell parents, if you've got young kids, every parent should have a will that says, where this child should go to if something happens to you. And you don't want the family to have a big fight about where they go. You want to decide that and talk about it and that kind of thing. And kids have this practical aspect that when they deal with that, just being able to talk about it and accept their sadness and everything, they do really well. So that's what I was talked about there. There isn't, so there are some books. One of the books back there actually on the list talks about, this is a technical term, but dialectical behavior therapy. It's the one about dealing with the child with strong emotions. And so it's a lot about acceptance. It's actually the same with pain. So the strong, people who have pain problems are always looking for a solution to their pain problem. Most people with chronic pain are going to be living with it often for a long time. And the most powerful sort of approach is called acceptance. So, and that applies to many other problems. So to answer your question, that approach fits very well. So for your child's distress, don't let it frighten you. Even average kids who aren't having trouble, they can have pretty rip-roaring, amazing temper tantrums. It can be kind of breathtaking, and it's not so uncommon. So that acceptance is becoming a bigger part of what people do to help parents.
I know that often children with health issues, whether it be allergies or bathroom issues, whatever it might be, can suffer from anxiety. So I was wondering if you could speak to how to help with those kind of anxieties.
Yeah, boy, really good question. The most common health problems for young kids actually nowadays are asthma and allergies. You know, kids are actually amazingly healthy for the most part, but those are the common problems. There's a significant number of kids out there who have, possible anaphylactic reaction, that kind of thing. And again, this is where the acceptance comes in. So when someone comes in, a child or a parent is frightened about having an anaphylactic reaction. Does anyone, put up your hand if you know what anaphylactic is? So you have trouble breathing. Yeah, okay, so you have trouble breathing, and it can be very, very dramatic and very dangerous. A lot of parents are tempted to reassure, well, it won't happen, we'll take care of you, nothing will go wrong, and so on. And with both adults and kids, we take the other approach. We'll say, well, if you get this allergy, most likely it will happen. Be good for you to be prepared. So, let's practice using the EpiPen. Let's know how to do it right away. Let's get independent with it as soon as possible. Ages. Don't just talk about it, but actually practice doing it and have drills and that kind of thing. And what's striking is that the children, what strikes us is how resilient kids are. So kids can deal with very threatening life situations, including very grim situations, amazingly well. And if you start to take a practical aspect of it, how do you cope and how do you problem solve, how do you become independent, how do you become confident, it really, really helps those kids. And some of that is, again, a bit against common sense, where with young children we might tend to reassure them a lot. This will be okay, we'll take care of it, that kind of thing. It's sort of a different approach to accept the reality that things do happen. It looks, just to respond one more bit, it looks like kids with anxiety, with health problems, will respond just as well. And they're, even a young adult, if you have one chronic health problem, you're way more at risk for having problems with anxiety and depression and that kind of thing. So they probably need some extra support here if a child's dealt with a chronic health problem.
I also think there was a part 2 to that around bedtime and anxiety, so I'll just maybe speak a little bit. I think there was a question around that, right?
I was just giving another health issue of bedtime and wedding.
Wedding?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I guess in terms of bedtime, one way to sort of tackle that particular issue would be to, use a behavior chart and a reward system around that. So, maybe getting Johnny to stay in bed for 15 minutes in a night, and then ensuring that, you can practice that sort of daily, and then rewarding that kind of behavior and then increasing that. So that's one way that I've often advised parents to use, sort of how to use that reward system for bedtime.
Now, we've heard of perception and acceptance and isolation, and how good or bad can it be to talk about and what the child can do, what the child can say and communicate? How good or bad can it be for the parent to tell the child that I'm anxious, I've had panic attacks, I'm having a bad day, I'm depressed, or not happy as well, but to show your child that it happens to me too, I'm not perfect.
I think there's some value in doing that, just in a way sort of normalizing some of that anxiety in a way, sharing sort of your own experiences. Having said that, I think if a parent is overly anxious, that certainly can interfere with the child's ability to overcome his or her anxiety. So I think it's a bit of a delicate balance of trying to relate in a really personal way around, I have trouble too doing that. But let's kind of work through that together, kind of like you can kind of couch it in that way. So I would say kind of striking a balance between sort of really showing one's anxiety and identifying and being able to understand what your child's going through. That's all about.
Does that answer the question? Yeah.
I'll try to keep this brief. I have a 9-year-old daughter, we have a 9-year-old daughter who has a few of the OCD kind of signs. Now,
it's like chicken and egg. Is it the anxiety that causes the OCD, or the OCD that causes the anxiety? And then, when you're a parent who goes like, what is this? You know, you say trying to, you know, to breathe or stay calm, when you yourself are kind of going like, what the hell is this? Right? Like that's, you know what I mean? Like you look at this and go,
what's this all about? Yeah.
What's this all about? And you can't help but feeling anxious yourself.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, now it's all about me. So.
The great thing about, maybe I'll just tell people about OCD a little bit, because not everybody would know about that problem. So obsessive compulsive disorder is a problem where people have obsessions or worries. A lot of them are about cleanliness or orderliness. I don't want to get germs on me or bacteria or whatever. And compulsions are things to try to control those worries, like washing your hands a lot or cleaning a lot and that kind of thing. We've been surprised actually how young we see children with that problem. And also we've been pleasantly surprised by how well it responds when the parents kind of get on, first of all, understanding it and then what they can do to help. So when you catch it, you know, often in adults we see adults who've had the problem for 20 years and had no help. But if you catch it early in life, there's some really good books for parents. So if you go on some of the websites that are mentioned there, there'll be some really good resources for parents. There's some very good books. And they'll give you advice about what you can do as a parent. It's a bit like some other anxiety problems that the solution isn't necessarily completely logical. So, you know, if someone's anxious, the first thing we always try is to reassure them. So you're not going to get bacteria, you're not going to get germs, you're not going to get sick. And with OCT, that tends not to work. You have to go the other way of, often it's restricting washing and saying this is the right amount and this is too much, and having rewards for washing the right amount and not too much, and that kind of thing. And getting used to more dirty situations. So you know, patting your dog and not washing your hand, coming home from school and not washing your hands, that sort of thing. And you know, a therapist or a parent helping a kid like that might, you know, put the hand on the dog and rub them and lick their hand, or do something like that. You know, one of the things about kids, one of the theories about why allergies are so common is not enough dirt. Okay, so not enough exposure to dirt and whatever. I mean, if you talk to people that work on the farm, you know, I mean, my sister-in-law is a big horse rider. You know, they go out and shovel out the stalls, and then they go and eat their sandwiches. And is there a sink out there? Is there hand sanitizer? No way. You just have, you know, you wipe your hands off and you have your sandwiches. And so our tolerance for bacteria is really, really high. So we work with kids on that and show them what situations really are risky and what situations aren't, and that kind of thing. So there's lots that parents can do. There's some really good resources for parents there. And I think your point, when you see these things that are kind of strange and scary, when you learn more about them, often you find, boy, there's some really useful things I can do to help my child. And then if it goes beyond a certain point, that's the point we need to get professional advice and guidance about how to handle things.
Can we sign up to beta test your website?
We just need, we can't quite hear you.
Oh, really? You can't hear me? I can't believe that. The OCD Center of Manitoba has some great books. We have our own library right in Winnipeg, so if any parents are interested in information for children and adolescents, etc., there is a lot of resources available there.
So I'll repeat that. The Manitoba government has done a really good job. We're actually much better than other provinces here for funding self-help organizations. So one of the organizations they fund is the Obsessive Compulsive Center, and there's very good resources there for kids and parents. Again, if you just Google Obsessive Compulsive Manitoba or Obsessive Compulsive Disorder Manitoba, it'll get you there, and there's some really excellent resources. And things like books you can read with your child and resources for different age groups. Those sorts of things. Really good point.
I have a question.
Just a minute.
Sorry, I just want to know if we could sign up to beta test your site.
Oh, okay. There's a sign-up sheet at the back, just asking for email addresses and so on. Just to let people know how we're going to do that, we're going to be evaluating one unit at a time in surveys. So someone could do all the surveys, and at the end of doing a survey, you get to print out material and keep it, so you can use it as parents. We get very good feedback on it. And we probably won't be ready for the website itself till about the end of November. But again, if we have your email, we'll send you information, you can get back to us, and we just, it'd be great to hear anyone that's interested in it. It's something that would complement, if you're doing something else to help with a problem, it'd be probably complementary to that.
Following on the suggestion that some kinds of reinforcement programs or rewards in order to assist kids to get past certain kinds of behaviors might be helpful, can you offer any basic guidelines around what are appropriate and helpful kinds of rewards and incentives as opposed to those that might be counterproductive?
I think, John had mentioned, some things that might be really useful would be things like, special time together or giving the child an opportunity to, say, choose dinner for Friday or activity-based type rewards. I think it's important to tailor it, so, a young child would not necessarily have the same reward as, say, an adolescent, so sometimes tangible rewards might be helpful for younger children. So, something small from the dollar store might be something that's appropriate for like a 6-year-old. A teenager might be, something like computer time or something like that. So those are just some suggestions I just have off the top of my head as to what might be considered as a reward. I often tell parents that you don't necessarily want to break the bank when it comes to rewards, so there are other ways of sort of creating that kind of reinforcement system.
One of the things I tell parents is it's good for your kids to be a little bit hungry, metaphorically speaking. Sometimes we run into families that the children have so much, it's hard to interest them in anything. So if you're watching 6 or 8 hours a day of television and you're, you've got all the things you want and everything you want, it's hard to motivate people. Having children in a thing where they've got something they want and they don't have is a really good lesson in life. So there's such a thing as too much in a lot of areas, and having a situation where your children have to work for special things and special activities can be really good for their learning.